we can rehab full gut job unit in 72 hours. A lot of my competition is rehabbing these units in 60 to 90 days. That's a huge advantage on things like vacancy, right? There's some of these processes within our business, and most of them draw back to speed. And speed, in my opinion, reduces risk.
Welcome back to another episode here on the Multifamily Wealth Podcast. Joining me this week is Logan Rankin, an incredibly successful investor, somebody who's built a portfolio in a different way than I think a lot of folks nowadays as it relates to raising capital, syndicating equity, leveraging other people's capital, or partnerships in general. And he's done it the old-fashioned way, just repurposing his own capital, recycling his own cash, and organically growing a very large portfolio. And I think this episode is going to be extremely eye-opening and tactical for a lot of the folks listening. So excited to get into this. But Logan, why don't you share a little bit about your background, maybe what you were doing before you got into real estate, and then give the spark notes as it relates to your real estate business career and what you're up to today.
That sounds good. Thanks for having me on, Axel. I appreciate it. Yeah. So before real estate, I spent a decade working for a Fortune 50 company. I worked for Target Corporation, was able to work my way up, started as an intern, actually. And I was in a lot of various different leadership roles. So got to learn a lot about leadership, got to learn a lot about operations and process. And then I got to learn about like managing large P&Ls. At one point, I got the opportunity to lead 19,000 people, oversaw $3.5 billion worth of sales. Just got some really, really cool opportunities at a young age working for a Fortune 50 company. And, that not everybody takes that path, but I really feel like that helped me in my next chapter of my business career, which obviously was, developing and building real estate related companies as well as my own holdings. And my second chapter was real estate, started in 2013. I was accumulating more and more wealth, and I started to realize that I wanted more control over that wealth. My mom was a teacher. My dad coached and worked in a factory. We just, we weren't really brought up in real estate, and I didn't know anybody that was wealthy. So you read enough books, though, you understand that if you want to put your money, into a place that obviously can, that you can have more control over, that you can have that cash flow now, real estate is a really good sector for that. So in 2013, we bought a single family house. My wife and I saved up for over 2 years to buy that first house. And we still own it, actually, and underwrote the deal, managed the deal. Promised my wife, that's a big part of it, is making sure you're both on the same page. And with us not having anybody that we knew in real estate and putting all of our savings for 2.5 years into this first property, it was very important that it went well. And we underwrote it. I forget the exact numbers, but it was around $3,200 is what we underwrote it for. A year goes by, it produced something around $3,100. So we're within $100. And I was addicted from there, man. So from there, the next year I bought a duplex. So doubled the amount of units. The year after that, I bought 2 duplexes. And I really just started scaling. Scaled that from, I self-managed to 7 units. Then it was just too much with working 70-hour work weeks in my leadership job. So then I had a third-party management company from 7 units to 252 units. And at about that point, there's enough cash flow coming in, because it's not what you make, it's what you keep, from the real estate portfolio that I was barely working in. And I started to realize that the reason I kept getting promoted at my corporate job was because I was pretty good with people. I understood systems and how those relate to driving a P&L. And that's what a lot of property management is. And, with 252 units, that was enough to start the property management company. So I started that in 2019, started with 4 people. And then built that company from 4 people to today. If you include part-time, it's about 150 people. We have a construction arm, which is a pretty big part of that headcount. And I also grew my portfolio to 4,086 units. And yeah, what's unique about that is I own all the equity in that. So I've never had a partner in that holding portfolio, never done a syndication, and have been able to, scale with some great opportunities and utilizing the construction and property management company to do that.
What an incredible story. There's any number of avenues that we could go down. A high level, easy question right off the top. I mean, maybe it's not easy. Maybe you've deliberated, on this topic over the years, but why no partners? Why no investor capital, right? Was there a deeper reasoning behind that?
So the reason has changed. So in the beginning, the reason is because I didn't know anybody wealthy. Like my family wasn't wealthy. We didn't know any friends wealthy. I didn't know anybody in real estate. So honestly, who is going to give me money, when I didn't know anything about real estate managing, etc. So I just did it all myself. That's why so I started slow. Like, yeah, everybody sees how many units I have now, but everybody forgets that it took me 3 years to buy 7 units. So like, it took me a long time, and that's just the way I learned. Like I really like to understand the operations behind things, like how to optimize things and create a great business for the people that live there, but also a profitable for the person that owns it. So in the beginning, to answer your question, is like, I had no business raising money because I didn't know anything of what I was doing. I needed to learn it first. And then by the time I learned it, my reason changed. I'm like, holy shit, this is really hard. Managing and operating a property is really, really hard. And I felt it was much easier to find money than it was to operate the property. So like in my head, I'm like, if I'm going to do all the work, if I'm going to hold the property management company accountable when I had the third party, and if I'm going to build my own management company, like you can't literally pay me enough to do that. So if I'm going to work so hard to operate it right and reposition this asset and utilize my processes that I've built and the people that I've trained, then I want to, and take all the risk, then I want the reward that comes along with it too. So my reason changed is, instead of spending all this time looking for money, I spent a ton of time looking for how to operate my properties better. And that has really helped me continue to scale. And when I retired too, Axel, I would just tell you, like, I just didn't want to work for somebody anymore. And I know, like, when you have investors, they're technically working for them, but you are. Like, you got to answer to them. And we'll get into this later, but the style of properties that I was buying, I just knew there'd be a lot of questions. I was taking risk, and I didn't want to spend all my time explaining to them why I'm taking this risk and why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, because I knew that would just slow me down. And I wanted to focus all of my time on how do I create speed and velocity. And if I make a mistake, I just felt so much better that it was my money at risk and not somebody else's.
Yeah, without a doubt. And just for context too, I forgot to mention it after you discussed your background. Where in the country are you? Where are you operating?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin, perfect. So the follow-up question to growing a large portfolio with your own capital, something that I've faced, something I'm sure a lot of the listeners who are actively growing a portfolio with their own dough are probably facing, is how you responsibly allocate your cash as you're growing both your portfolio, but you also have to grow a business to really support that, right? And there's staff, and there's, you're balancing earnest money deposits on new deals, capital going into renovations on this deal. Maybe you're making an internal hire, an admin assistant, whatever. Cash is going in a lot of different areas. And then when you take a deal done, it's not as if it pays you right away, at least in the value add game, right? You're spending money before you're stabilizing and before the money starts coming back. And especially if you're trying to do a higher volume of deals, it can get really stressful to kind of manage all of the different places that you're sending money. And I think that's oftentimes why a lot of people just go out there and raise the money, because it makes it easier to control their own cash. And then you also pick up some fees too in the capital raising game, right? You maybe get an acquisition fee, an asset management fee, helps to create a little bit more predictability in revenue. So with all of that being said, kind of setting the stage there, how did you think about all of that as you were growing your portfolio? And did you ever run into a situation where that became a challenge, or, just did the snowball kind of start rolling in a sense that necessarily wasn't really a real challenge at any point? But how did you kind of balance where your cash was going and how you actually, spread it around as you were growing so rapidly?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. So I would say I've always been ultra organized, and I feel like you've got to be in the value add game, especially when you stack deals. I mean, there's been times I've been repositioning 15 different deals, 1,500 units at the same time. Like, it's a lot happening. Actually, behind me, this is a shameless plug, but I wrote an entire book on like organizing your financial future and how just important that is. The amount of people I meet in the real estate and business game that are not organized with their own personal finances is just ultimately super scary. So I would tell you, I'm really organized, and you don't need to be yourself, but then you need an accountant, or you need an EA, or you need somebody to help keep you organized. So it is a challenge as you're scaling too. Like, anybody that's done significant value add deals knows that there's a burn rate that's associated with it as well too. And when you really get going, like, when I was somewhere between 500 to 1,500 units. And if you look at, like, I've posted this, on Twitter and other social media, like, you can see the scale start to happen after I started the property management company. And some of those years is just like really spiked. So, the cash flow itself from the units that were stabilized have to be able to cover the future properties that are not stabilized. And then I think business strategies I deployed to be able to help with my cash flow or my burn rate. And just to be honest, help me scale is to reposition these properties faster. A typical investor can take a 100-unit apartment complex and rehab every single unit and the exterior, et cetera. That's going to take them 3 or 4 years. We are consistently doing it in like somewhere between 6 to 12 months. So like 300 to 400% faster through some of our processes. Well, obviously, what does that do? Well, the burn rate or the risk that you just asked me about is it's not burning as long, right? It's a shorter period, which also helps you hit the refi event. And if you do things right and you've bought a great property at a great basis and now it's worth a lot more, there's the opportunity to refi that money out tax-free, which helps fund future deals. So I did a lot of that, Axel. Is really just understanding that you got to be super organized, but you also have to have control over the speed of which you go into and execute these repositions. I mean, we can talk about this later too, but we can rehab full gut job unit in 72 hours. A lot of my competition is rehabbing these units in 60 to 90 days. That's a huge advantage on things like vacancy, right? And the amount of times that you're replacing the resident and getting somebody in there at market rent. So your loss to gain is significantly improving. But there's some of these processes within our business and most of them draw back to speed. And speed, in my opinion, reduces risk.
Yeah, 100%. And this is the perfect segue because this is where I wanted to go next as well. And everyone listening, he just talked about doing full gut renos in 72 hours. We're going to come back to that. But you only have so much time and you can only spend it in so many different places when you're starting and when you're trying to rapidly grow. And I think a lot of successful investors that I see, at least early, and you're probably doing both of these now at scale, so you're touching both of these, is you're there spending a lot of time finding incredible deals and investing time doing that, whether it's direct to seller marketing or you're really being diligent with brokers. That's kind of your special sauce, and you're buying a deal at 10, 15% below market value. You're creating some value. You can pull your equity out quickly. That allows you to turn your cash very quickly, right? The other side, at least in a lot of the successful investors I know that grew quickly, they're still buying good deals, but not like, insanely discounted deals. Maybe they're still buying primarily broker deals, but they're crushing the operational side. They're leasing for top rents. They're leasing quickly. They're renovating quickly, renovating, below what other competitors are renovating for. There's maybe some other special sauce from an operational standpoint that's allowing them to maximize the performance of the property. And they're drilling a higher NOI in a shorter period of time. And then that allows them to pull cash out quickly, right? The killer investors are doing a combination of both, which I'm sure you're doing. And we're going to spend time talking about the operations here in the next handful of minutes. But in general, that's just a framework to think about, okay, so we can maximize value in a couple of different ways. And it's just a matter of where you're spending your time and building out your process. So let's talk about the operational side, though, and we'll start with that 72-hour comment that you made, which is insane because you're right. It does take most people at least 30 days, if not 60 plus days, to do a full gut renovation. If we're talking kitchen, bath, paint, flooring, fixtures, etc. Doing that in 72 hours is ridiculous. So maybe talk about some of the infrastructure that you've developed that allows you to actually execute on that timeline. I also just selfishly would love to learn how you kind of got there over time too, in terms of like when you started bringing, I'm assuming you have folks in-house, when you brought them in-house and what it actually looks like now.
I think what makes me a little bit unique too is because, right, I wasn't spending a ton of time looking and going out and finding partners and having to explain myself. So that is an advantage because I think that's real. If you're syndicating a deal, there's a certain amount of attention that you have to put together to everything you send out. I don't like doing things over and over, which is why I got really good at building systems and processes. Because if I had a really good system and I could put a person in that system, right, then they would be able to do the repeatable process over and over and we could get elite results. I bet there's not too many people that own over 550 million worth of real estate and could tell you or had the opportunity, I should say, or maybe it's not an opportunity that has done delinquency, has done accounting, has done the terms, there's not a single thing in the process. I don't do it anymore. Now I just manage one person, a president, and another person that runs a construction company. I had to get a really deep understanding of what does the process look like. And then I built it from scratch because what I realized in this industry is there's not a lot of operators that own a lot of real estate. So they just haven't taken the time to break down the process itself. So all of our process to break down like this, Axel, and then I'll get into the 72 hours or any other process you want to get deep with is first, we learn the very best way to do something. And then we break it down step by step by step. So we literally write out every single step, which is not that hard. Like, for example, one of the things you have to do when you rehab a unit, right, is you got to rip out the flooring, you got to put in new flooring. So like, I remember when we're looking at the best way, we use luxury vinyl plank. We want our flooring to last, 10 plus years. We're pet friendly. It's very important that it's like premium and can hold up against, bigger dogs and all that stuff. Anyway, so you find the right material, but then you also you could Google this. You probably can chat GPT this now. But what we did is we just found the 3 best people that all they do is put in flooring, and we hired them and we watched them, right? And we found the very best way to put in flooring. And then that became our best practice. So it's not, hey, put in flooring however you want. It's no, this is the best way to put in flooring. This is the way we'll always put in flooring. So it's done the exact same way. So the first thing you do is you find the best way, and then you write out every single step. Second thing we do is we create a video, because people are visual, right? So if you hired somebody, they can read about putting in flooring, but they can actually see the very best way to be able to put in flooring, or when you need to cut, or, material waste, whatever. And then the last thing we do is we certify them. And we do that through, okay, first you're going to watch the person do it. Then you're going to do it with the trainer. And then you're going to do it while the trainer watch you. And if you do all that right, now you're flooring certified, or you're certified on that step. So I just, before we even get into things, we're very meticulous about creating a great standard operating procedure and then training. And then once they're certified, one of the coolest things we do in our company is we assign a scoreboard and sometimes even incentives, so that everybody across the company can see how that process, or those results that the process is trying to drive, are doing. And that's a big part of what we do. In fact, we do it on with the rehab teams. Let me get a little bit into the rehab teams, and then it's a long process. It's 18 different steps, but let's start with the first step, right? A resident puts in a 60-day notice. So they want to move out. What our company, that goes to our legal team, and then the legal team will make sure that they put in the right move out notice, right? The right legal structure. And then we have an engagement specialist reach out and, try to figure out why they're leaving in the first place. We have 72 hours to do that. It has a person and has a timeline. We want to figure out, if there's a way to be able to save that resident. Maybe they're moving to a different city with a job and they didn't realize we have housing there. So I would tell you, the best way is to keep the resident, but they have 72 hours to do it. If that person is moving to a different state, we don't have property in, then they put that unit in what we call the queue. Once it's put into the queue, we have a construction specialist that then schedules a pre-inspection. So this is something that I noticed when I didn't have a management company. Is what normally happens is someone puts in a 60-day notice, 60 days go by, the unit's empty. Then the property management company walks the unit. It's like, oh shit, we got to replace these cabinets. We got to do this. We got to do that. Right. So they put all that, they go walk it. They put it all together. 3 days goes by. Right. Then they send it to the owner. The owner looks at it. They reviews it. They hem and haw. Another 3 days goes by and they finally approve it. Then once they get approved, they find the general contractor. General contractor says, well, I can't get in there for 2 weeks. Finally, they get in there. Then the general contractor says, oh, we're missing material. That's going to take another 2 weeks. Right. Typically, at least in the Midwest, it's like on your very best day, it's going to be a 30-day rehab process, but most likely 45 to 60. I'm like, this is crazy. This is causing so much vacancy loss, right? It's taking so much longer to reposition the asset. It's all my money that's tied up. So I said, well, again, why don't we just do a pre-inspection before the resident even leaves? So obviously it's put in the queue. There's 57 days left. From day 57 to day 50, so there's 7 days. The construction specialist would notify the resident that there's going to be a pre-inspection, and then our construction leader would go walk that unit, Axel. So they walk that unit with their iPad. We have a sheet of paper. We only do 4 kinds of rehabs. We're like a car wash. We do a silver package, an elite package, a gold package, and a platinum package. Maybe we can talk about that later, but it's all the same because, making sure that the company understands what we're selling and what we're doing, is very important. We use the same materials. It just helps our teams. It speeds everything else up. But anyway, we go in there and we notify what package it's going to be based on the condition of the unit. Obviously, if it's like an eviction, it's trashed, we're most likely going to do a gold standard, which is we're literally rehabbing everything. Maybe it's not so bad though, and maybe it's like a light flip. We just basically decide what needs to be done. On day 50, that pre-inspection is brought back to the office, right, or sent in through the iPad, and then we are sending that to our suppliers. So our suppliers can order all the materials 50 days before the tenant even moves out. That's why we don't have material issues. And then it is also scheduled with the turn team. We have 22 turn teams now. We started with one, but we have 22 turn teams. So obviously we want to make sure that is scheduled so that on the day that they move out, all the material shows up at 12:01. Our turn team is there, right? They can go at it. What else is happening is we post the unit. So we post the unit 50 days before they're gone, right? We're trying to rent this because we know how fast it's going to take the rehab. So when we can get in there, we can rehab that once it's empty. 3 days later, the fourth day, we can get a new resident in. And we can do that because all the units look exactly the same, depending on the package. So if you always do a gold standard package with the same flooring, the same cabinets, the same everything, like the same mirror, the same fixtures, and we have an entire brand division that does construction programming. They go into new construction, they take those ideas, and then we put that into our 1970s to 2000 vintage apartments. But it's just over and over. So the leasing agent knows what they're selling. The rental tech or the crew captain knows how they're rehabbing it. The brand team member knows how to post it. So all that matters in the steps. So there's a few more steps. And then anyway, we speed all the way up for the sake of this podcast. We speed up to like the day of the turn. And the first thing that we do there is very important that the crew captain is checking the materials list to make sure that everything was done the right way. And then while he's doing that, we always have a rental tech 2 and we have a rental tech 1, right? So a rental tech 1 is like a newer team member, and they're going to do things like the easy stuff, right? The ripping out all the floorings, part demo, and then they're going to do things like trim and luxury vinyl plank, the easy stuff. The rental tech 2 is doing things that are a little bit more complicated. He got promoted, right? He got promoted over time, and now he's doing things like the bathroom, right? So you might have some plumbing stuff. We always remove the toilets to put energy efficient toilets and shower heads and so on and so forth. And then the crew captain's doing probably the most complicated stuff, and it's like hanging cabinets, electrical work, fixtures, etc. You just got to remember, like I only do apartments, only multifamily, and they're just boxes. So like it's actually not as complicated as people think. It's like there's everything that you do over and you do over and you do and over again. If you have time goals for everybody that are set, if you have all the materials and they're trained the right way and certified, as I said, it creates a ton of velocity. Of course, painting and cleaning overnight, and there's different things that you can do on your own, depending on how big you are, to really speed that process up. Yeah. So then they go at it. The construction leader checks in on them. Obviously, if there's any delays, they let them know right away. We do have a demo specialist. He's kind of like a runner. So he can go get materials, obviously, just help them stay on time. And then what's probably important step to skip to, I would say, Axel, is I talked about at the beginning of this, every good standard operating procedure has visibility around a scoreboard and incentives. Well, this is a really big process. Like we call it the turn life cycle, the life cycle of turning over a unit. So we have a scoreboard that measures quality, that measures speed, and that measures cost. And how we do that is for quality, in a single month, if any resident moves into a unit that you did, calls us back. Oh, there's a scratch in the trim. We don't like this. Come back. Or is just not satisfied with the unit. They cannot have a single one to receive 33% of their bonus. So our bar for quality is very, very high. Last year, we finished at a 98.5%. So for every 100 residents that are moving in, we're only going back for 1.5% of them. It's so high, by the way, that we actually guarantee that you'll be happy with the unit when you walk in, or you can rip up your lease within 14 days and we won't charge you anything. There's no penalty. There's no nothing. Like if you're paying good money for a unit, we're going to guarantee that you're going to love it. Our bar for quality is just very high. It smells good when you walk in. Like we make sure of it, got a nice little basket, but most of all, it's very detailed because every single turn team's receiving an extra bonus, right? So they can't have any. So our quality is very high. Obviously the second part of their bonus, they can receive another 33% of their bonus if they hit their speed goals, which we've kind of talked about. And then same with costs, and they definitely affect cost, right? If there's delays, if they don't put in the LVP the right way, for example, or break a cabinet, obviously we got to order more. So, a lot of that waste really goes into how they do things. And it's more than just the bonus they receive. And we do it kind of cool, by the way. And anybody that's listening to this can steal this. Our crew captain gets 50% of the bonus. The rental tech 2 gets 30% of it, and the rental tech 1 gets 20% of it. Well, we do that on purpose too, right? So like, first of all, you got to hit quality, speed, and cost to get all of your bonus as a crew. But then on top of that, if you get all of it, it's split based on percentages, and it inspires the rental tech one to want to learn and get certified on the things he needs to get certified for to become a rental tech two one day. And the rental tech two is learning from the crew captain. And we even give the crew captains like extra incentive to promote crew captains, because most of our teams are internal. We have 18 of the 22 teams. I think it's 18. I would have to double check, but the majority of our teams are actual employees, not 1099 crews. And a lot of that had just come from incentives and inspiring people to get certified so they get paid more. And I think that's really important. And then there's a fun component to every good standard operating procedure, by the way. And I know I'm belaboring this. I try to skip a few steps, but I love this shit.
Keep going. This is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So like all of them have team names, and the crew captain gets to pick the team names. So like, one of our highest quality teams right now are called the Beef Sticks, right? That's their name. So we got these crazy names across the 22 different teams, and we use Slack, but they all have the Slack. And, we have 5 different regions in our company right now. And it's important to be the best crew when on any given month for the entire company. And then within your region, Team Beef Sticks has our highest quality streaks. They have something like 111 straight move-ins, where they have not, think about this, did not go back for anything after you've rehabbed. Our average, we have over 200 DPCIs, actual items that we put on a pallet that we do for these renovations. Like it's a lot. You're completely renovating a unit. It's a lot to not screw up. So to have streaks, like some of these guys have streaks, but it's not even about like, our best teams, they do care about the money. I think that's important to say, but I would tell you they care more about being the best team and the bragging rights and the traveling trophy that comes along with. If you build a process just to drive a result for your company, I think you will not get the elite results unless you think about, well, what's in it for the people that are in the process? And we want people that are prideful. We want people that are driven for greatness, and we want to make sure that they earn more when we earn more. So that is why our speed's so high. To answer the question, Axel, it's not just because we have a really good, process that is, 18 steps with details underneath each of them. And I shared a majority of them with you just now. It's because we focus a lot on the end result, the visibility around that. I'll end with this. Like, our director of HR used to say this: everybody's got to see how they're doing, because undoubtedly you're going to have a different team, right? That sucks, that had a bad month, that is not doing good, or even individual team members. Because obviously we have this, same kind of standard operating procedures with our service techs, for example. We got 14 service techs and they get scored on everything. I want that team or that person to know they had a bad month. Okay. And I want them to feel what that feels like. And I think, a lot of people would be like, well, they're just going to quit. Like, if they see how bad they are, like, that's demoralizing. They're just going to quit. I said, if they quit and they were the worst, why is that a bad thing? Number one.
Yeah.
And if they don't quit and they call the crew captain from Team Beef Sticks and they say, hey, what the hell are you doing? Because I can't get a streak of 5. Can you help me out? And he's like, dude, you got to give everybody time goals right away. Like you got to post the time goals, and you got to make sure the time goals are visible, and then you got to hold them accountable to them. And all of a sudden he goes from the worst to the middle, and then better, and then better. Right? Like, we all suck at something. Like, we all make mistakes, myself included, but like, it's a matter of, are you okay sitting there? Visibility creates, like, now the leader doesn't even have to coach this guy. The guy's coaching himself. He's calling the best crew captain. So it has really allowed on some of our Slack channels, and then behind the scenes, some of our team members that have bad performances to not necessarily go to their boss, but they just go to the person that they now see is the best, and they ask insightful questions. So it's almost like, we're creating a culture of, how do we together become better? And who's the best. He's right there. You can see it on the scoreboard. So anyway, I think that drives a lot of engagement.
That was incredible, man. There was no shot I was going to interrupt you as you were running through that. Giving the crew chief the ability to name their crews or have a team name is so interesting. That creates such a good culture, I would imagine, in the Slack groups and all of that, and creates such a positive environment for what can otherwise be a pretty stressful component of the process.